That's fine. Let him come. Let him come.
Marcus Freeman was just hired at defensive coordinator for Notre Dame. Starting with Ilya, what's y'all's reaction, and how do y'all feel about it?
My initial reaction was total utter happiness. I thought in terms of filling Clark Lee's shoes, I thought it was either Freeman or Elston would be the best person for the job, and I'm really happy that Notre Dame went and got Freeman. This is a big hire, not just for the defense because the styles are still similar, the schematics are still similar. But in terms of recruiting, I think he's going to be a big help in terms of recruiting. You could see, I mean, some of the stats that Cincinnati defensively put up last year. Imagine if he had those same type of players, at Notre Dame as he did at Cincinnati. So I'm very excited for the potential that he could bring here at Notre Dame. So
yeah, I agree completely. Comedy, what do you think about Marcus Freeman?
I was genuinely surprised we were able to get him. I mean, put it this way, LSU gave him pretty much ran out the red carpet for him and gave him a better check, and he told them no. But it took a hell of a lot for Brian Kelly to get him and Jack Swarbrick, and they did it. It's absolutely nuts that you could lose Clark Lee and somehow, in some eyes, upgrade at the defensive coordinator position.
Yeah. It was a little disappointing that a lot of Notre Dame fans were upset with the hire because they felt like he was a one and done or a two and done, and that's how college football is nowadays. Not all coordinators are going to stay, especially in big time programs like Alabama and Notre Dame, LSU. They're going to leave and they're going to go be head coaches somewhere else. So it was a little disappointing to see fans.
Wait, like, basically telling me they shouldn't hire the best guy available because he's good at his job.
I mean,
what kind of logic is that?
Yeah, to be fair, in their defense, I could see the potential argument as to why there are some concerns about a one and done or a two and done because you saw, I mean, the most recent example is what happened to LSU, specifically offensively. Now you could say that, their roster, there was a huge turnaround and all that stuff, but you saw like the dramatic like drop off, just, from LSU, they went from being potentially the greatest team that college football has ever seen to, they couldn't even win, 5 games. This was a top 10 preseason team, and they were one of the biggest disappointments in college football. And I understand that there's a lot that goes into that, but the coaching turnover is certainly one of those factors that led to this huge like disappointment, I guess.
If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to comment so we can post them and answer your questions. But how I feel about Marcus Freeman, with Cincinnati, he was top 5 in multiple categories on defense. He's like you said, an upgrade to the defense coordinator position, which is surprising and which I didn't expect. When we first lost Clark Lee, I was like, we just lost. We're not going to get better at that defense coordinator, and we did. Honestly, this is big. We're going to get better at recruiting. He coached at Ohio State and other big time universities as well, and he was a big time recruiter there too. So for him to be coming here for us, we're going to bring in some big guys on defense and recruiting, probably in the 2022 class. How do y'all feel with recruiting wise this impacts us?
It's hard to tell because of kind of going back to, obviously this helps us a lot. It helps Notre Dame a lot because the glaring weakness was in the Rose Bowl game was the speed on the secondary, the fact that we couldn't really cover any of their receivers or even tackle, anybody basically in the perimeter or out in space. So, in terms of recruiting, I think this could help us, push to that next level that Notre Dame is now trying to fulfill. But it's kind of hard to tell because I don't know how the future is going to look, in terms of Marcus Freeman. If he succeeds here, he's obviously going to get a job or he'll be able to coach somewhere. He's going to get the opportunity. So it's really hard to tell for me in terms of recruiting. Obviously, it's a big help that we could get someone like him and his pedigree, but I'm just not sure in terms of long-term recruiting, how it really helps us.
What about you, Comedy?
I mean, it's really hard to tell, but the way that he was at a small university, and I'm just wanting to see what he will be able to do with ND talent. And the fact that they'll see that what they did at Cincinnati and think, wow, he could do this for me. I really think that could be a big factor.
Yeah, he got some good 4-star players in Cincinnati for defense at Cincinnati of all places. It's funny that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's funny that we always take Cincinnati's coaches. We do with Brian Kelly. We're doing it with. We're just like, how we're Boston colleges, like they're our little brother. It's kind of like maybe we're Cincinnati's little brother with their coaches, taking all their coaches. But yeah, I think recruiting is going to go up big time on defense.
And
really good. I mean,
I had no idea how much the Cincinnati fans hated us. I had no idea that they hated us for that.
Yeah.
And they were all just like, oh, see you October 2nd. You don't know the hell's coming to you. I was thinking, oh, I'm so scared.
Come on. That's probably one of the toughest games on our schedule. So,
I guess my question is, do you think that Jack Swarbrick and Brian Kelly would give, what Marcus Freeman asked for and more, if you think that there wasn't some sort of like 3 to 4 year commitment at least? Do you think that even if they obviously probably had a discussion, hey, if you came here, how long do you think you would stay here for, especially if you succeeded in your first 2 years here? Do you think that there was some sort of agreement in terms of a 3 to 5 year commitment out of Marcus Freeman? Do you think that Notre Dame would feel comfortable if Marcus Freeman was on the fence about that?
Yes. I mean, he could have been head coach this year. Honestly, right. I don't think they're expecting him to stay that long. However, I think like I said on Twitter, I think he's a 2-year, and that's it. Will Freeman on the board? Do you think the Irish will get Diggs? I think we land Diggs anyway. I mean, he grew up an LSU fan in Louisiana. I think we're going to end up getting him. I don't think Freeman really affects that because Diggs is a running back and Freeman's a defensive coordinator. But I do think that we land Diggs anyway. He's already committed to us. LSU is got a lot of running backs in their 2021 class, so I don't really see Diggs going to LSU when we only have 2 committed to us and 1 signed to us. So, but back what we were saying on Freeman, yeah, I think it's 2 years. I don't see just 1. I think 2, and then he'll go coach at a big time program and be successful.
I thought the plan for Freeman would be like a defensive coordinator here and then try to poach that Michigan job, but that's thrown out the window. So
yeah. Do y'all think that Clark Lee is successful at Vanderbilt?
I'm sorry, repeat that question again.
Do y'all think that Clark Lee is going to be successful at Vanderbilt?
It's hard to tell because
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because it's not because it's Vanderbilt or Clark Lee. It's because it's the SEC. The SEC is such a, they're the conference, they're the top conference in college football. And it's such a, a top heavy, conference with, teams like Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida. I mean, there's just a lot of teams that you have to get through. Now, can they be, better than where they were with Derek Mason? Absolutely. But I'm not sure if you're going to see, in terms of when you look at the final record, a different result in terms of improvement because, they have to play all those teams, and it's going to be really hard, to even compete with those teams with his like first 2 to 3 years as a head coach there.
What about you, Comedy?
I feel the same way. Like, will he have success? I mean, sure, but it's how much success can you reasonably have at Vanderbilt? First off, the biggest thing they did this year was involve the kicker. That's on itself, and I don't have a problem with that, just like you know. And then they went 0-10. So yes, they'll get better, but that's because they can't get any worse. And
Comedy, you might want to
it's the NCC. They're
your headphones are
expecting to do.
in and out. Your headphones are making you come in and out a little bit. I'll take them out.
That didn't happen.
But that's better. Because y'all are also forgetting that years ago, James Franklin was head coach at Vanderbilt, and they were winning.
No, you didn't.
They were winning 7 to 8 games with James Franklin at Vanderbilt before he went to state.
I mean, but hang on, how long was he the head coach there?
Who? Franklin?
True.
Yeah, how long was he at Vanderbilt for?
Not that long.
Really? Wow. I mean, ooh, I gotta look. I gotta look at this. He was only there for 2 years. Wow. Or wait, was he? Yeah, he was only there for 2 years. He's been at Penn State since 2014. Oh my God. Wow. So, I mean, you could kind of argue that point, sure, but the SEC, back in 2011 through 13, I think like you could really argue that the only good team was Alabama, because Georgia was inconsistent, not as consistent as they are now. Florida was on the down because Urban Meyer just left and they were still rebuilding. South Carolina had those like 2 to 3 good years, when they had, Jadeveon Clowney at the time. I think it was around that time. So I just don't think the SEC was then what it is now in terms of athletes and programs.
Always getting those 5-star athletes. Hold on. Well, Lee's departure, do you think we will lose any other defensive coaches with Freeman coming on board? I do think we lose Elka. I think he was expecting for years and years
Elston
coordinator, and he was going to be the next up. I think he's.
I think you meant Elston, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Elston, he's probably heading to Purdue.
Yeah, it was kind of expected. That one was obvious. Kind of like that was an obvious connection there. If Elston wasn't going to get the job, why would he want to stay here as a defensive coach? When he knows he could be a defensive coordinator at some other decent program.
Yeah, I could see Purdue. That's a good landing spot.
Or he could go back to his alma mater at Michigan. If they might take a look at him if he applies there. I don't see how that would be such a bad hire for the Wolverines. So
it wouldn't be with Don Brown leaving too. That position's open, and I honestly Don Brown wasn't a bad defensive coordinator. He just had they had a
fall from grace.
He was just too stubborn. He wouldn't. He was really stubborn about making adjustments or trying to change his schematics based on the sort of roster that he had. It was kind of like the problem that Brian Van Gorder had here at Notre Dame. So like that was really like the big thing. It was like he was too stubborn to really make any changes or adjustments based on the roster that he had, and it obviously bit him in the ass.
Yeah. So now change of subject, something we were also going to talk about. The book, quarterback, is done at Notre Dame. What was y'all's favorite in-book moment? Starting with comedy.
Well, I know what everyone's favorite moment truly is, but I'll do one sensible. And remember, Wimbush was doing absolutely nothing that game. The offense was just dead, and it looked like we were just going to lose that game, and everything was just going to be bad heading into the offseason. And then Book comes in and just reignites the offense, and that would just be the story for the next year and a half. The difference with him and Wimbush, and then of course that throw to Miles Boykin, that amazing catch. Will be forever in the hearts of everyone with the Book era. Always will be.
Yeah, I got some LSU friends, so every time they talk trash about LSU Notre Dame, I'm like, we beat y'all every time we play y'all. I mean, how are we not good if we beat y'all?
Yeah. I would I'm gonna stay away from that final Clemson drive too. I'm gonna go with that game-winning drive against Virginia Tech last year, because in terms of context, the week before unfortunately we got our asses whooped by Michigan. He had one of his worst performances as a Notre Dame football player here, and then you clearly saw just how much that final touchdown drive. Yep. Thank you, OC. Thank you. You saw just once he got into that end zone, you saw that monkey, that metaphorical monkey off his back, and just he grew like such swagger, just going to the sideline. And then you saw how the offense was for the rest of the year after that. Those last 5-6 games, including the bowl game, the offense was efficient. I mean, they were really unstoppable. Ian Book was, and that drive really changed, how the offense did for the year.
For my moment, I'm not going to avoid it like y'all did. Definitely Clemson. That throw to Avery Day at the 10-yard line. That moment, I was like, we lost. There's 0% chance we're winning. And that dot to Avery Davis, and then both of them. And one for a touchdown to go to overtime, and they ended up beating Clemson in overtime. They beat the number one team in the country. How can that not be your favorite Ian Book moment?
That throw is the prettiest throw I've ever seen Ian Book make at his Notre Dame career. That throw to Avery Davis, the way he steps into the pocket, it was a perfect spiral. I mean, that throw could not have been any prettier. It really was a pretty pass.
It's funny because especially in the next Clemson game and Alabama game, there were a lot of times we had open receivers down the field deep.
I can still remember the call from Mike Tirico.
Oh.
Word for word. It's that iconic, man. Even after we got a good ass to us by Clemson in the ACC title game, it'll still always be there.
We got a good question from Notorious Dame Zero. Who do you guys think the 3 starting wide receivers are? I like to start this one. I have Jordan Johnson on the outside, and we're going to have Lindsey in the slot. And then we're going to have, hopefully, Kevin Austin. But with his injuries, wouldn't surprise me if they got a grad transfer as well. I do expect a receiver to come transfer to Notre Dame and play as well. But I do think that it's going to end up being Kevin Austin and Jordan Johnson on the outside. And they're going to have Lindsey in the slot with his speed. That's how I would do it. I don't know about y'all. And as of now, Avery Davis, is he returning? I don't think he is. I know Ben and McKinley both have left. So Davis hasn't announced yet, but it seems likely he's going to, how long he's been there. And all of his position changes. It's just the inevitable he's going to leave. What do y'all think about the 3 receivers?
They have to move Lindsey to the slot, first of all. I don't see why Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees can't use Braden Lindsey like they use Chris Fink. I mean, he's faster, he's more athletic than Fink, and you saw the kind of success that Fink had. I don't see why Lindsey wouldn't be just as effective, if not more effective, in the slot, especially in that Fink role. But yeah, this question, it seems so easy because you could go with, Lindsey, Johnson, and Kevin Austin if he stays healthy, but it's just so complicated because all those receivers, outside of Lindsey, I guess, but, he's had the injury bug just like Kevin Austin did. It's such a complex answer because you you don't know because of the inexperience, but I would assume it'd be those three guys, but I don't know, especially with those, incoming freshmen like Colsey and Lorenzo Styles. He could be a potential X factor in that wide receiver room coming in. So I just don't know. Obviously, right now I'd have to go with those three, but I don't know. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's also tough because we have Colsey coming in and we have Lorenzo Styles, and one of those two could. But the spring game's going to show a lot to see who we're going to end up playing. Hold on, let me add. Internet is terrible. Your internet is terrible. No, I'm trying to upload this to YouTube, and you're glitching in and out.
Oh, this is terrible.
I'm sorry. I don't
Comedy,
mean to.
come on, man.
I know I'm a terrible person, Bernie.
Will be the three receivers.
All right, so there's really still a lot up in the air, I mean, but as of right now, it would probably be Jordan Johnson, Braden Lindsey. Those are probably the two that are locks at this point, or at least I'd hope so. And if Avery Davis back, then he's the third. But if he leaves, then that's the question: do you bring a transfer in, or do you go a Lawrence Keys or someone like that? But if Davis comes, then yeah, it's Avery Davis.
I think that they bring a transfer in. I think they bring transfers in multiple positions. I think they transfer someone in at receiver, and I think they transfer another defensive back like they did with McLeod from NC State. And I do think that they end up transferring a defensive lineman as well, just because of the inexperience. Not going to say that he's going to start over Foskey and etc. But I do think they get a transfer in at the defensive line position just as an insurance.
Yeah, with this whole transfer thing, especially with COVID and that there's no scholarship restrictions just for this year. It's going to be really interesting to see who leaves and who comes to Notre Dame. I have no clue. This is probably the only offseason where it's just so much uncertainty in terms of the transfer portal. I hope we can get a couple grad transfers at those positions that you were talking about, but I literally have no clue who's going to be coming here. I have not found anything.
We had no idea that Cone was coming from us.
Yeah, exactly. That shocked everybody the other night when Cone said, hey, he's transferring here.
Yeah, we are very deep at tight end. We got Michael Myers, we also got. I don't think that Wright isn't coming back.
No,
you have Evans coming in for the 2021 class, and we have Takas still. So we're pretty deep. I do expect Takas to fill in that void that Trumbull's leaving and being the blocking one, as they use Michael Mayer down the field to pass to a lot more. We're very deep at tight end. We've always, to be honest, it's irritating when Notre Dame fans are nervous about the offensive line and tight end position when, that's the one position every year we shouldn't be nervous about because that's what we can produce. So
and develop, not only produce but develop. That's those underclassmen that have been sitting behind, those four starters that are leaving. You saw, it was the same thing back in 2018 when McGlinchey and Nelson left. Everyone's like, oh, how can we replace this? Arguably the best offensive line Notre Dame has ever had. And they went undefeated that year. They went undefeated that year. So I don't. I understand the uncertainty because it's four starters and Jarrett Patterson is the only one coming back, obviously, next year. So it's still good to have Patterson back at that center position. But, we have a lot of great offensive line talent coming in this year. And there's the kids that have been coming in for the last 2-3 years. Hopefully they should be developed by now to where we could be comfortable with them starting. So I don't see offensive line, tight end, being the problem of the offense.
we've seen Zeke Correll. We've seen we're going to get Blake Fisher, Rocco Splendor. We have Josh Baker.
Josh
We have
Love.
a lot of good young offensive linemen that we can have. What do you think, Comedy?
If he could talk.
No.
It's something like we should never have to worry about O-line or tight end, usually ever. I've said it before. Notre Dame's indefinitely O-line diversity. They'll always have a good one. The tight ends, like, yeah, you could say Iowa, but if Notre Dame's not one, they're two.
I think Notre Dame is
those
two.
are the things that have always been consistent with Notre Dame. Always, every time. So to have concerns for it now would just be ridiculous. If a few games in then it's struggling, then yes, you have concerns, obviously. But as of right now, I'm not worried about it. They'll figure it out. They always do.
I do think it's obvious Notre Dame's O-line you when last year in the NFL, not this year, last year, 3 of the 5 all-pro list were Notre Dame offensive linemen, and 4 of them were coached by Brian Kelly, one including Kelsey was the center from Cincinnati. So,
boy.
Yep, Brian Kelly is really good with O-linemen. Tight end, I don't think we're number 1 on tight end. I think we used to be, but you can't, with Iowa having Dallas Clark, one of the best of all time. They got a top 3 tight end in Kittle, and they got Hawkinson, and they got Font. It's just, we have Eifert and we got Rudolph, and Rudolph's on the decline. He's getting old. Eifert's injured every year. I think we're just because of what we can produce and them getting drafted every year, we're number 2. But with NFL production, I do think Iowa is tight end you. It's close though. Hold on. What was the key point Freeman selected Notre Dame over LSU? Tigers seem very, very, very confident. I'm going to let both of y'all answer this. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Obviously we don't know the exact answer as to why Freeman chose at Notre Dame over LSU, but to me it's about the players. I think that's first and foremost. I think it's the players and the schematics. I think, Clark Lee and Matt Freeman, they had a very similar schematic. I don't think so. Matt Freeman isn't going to have to, try to get everyone up to speed in terms of, what he wants to implement. So I think it was just a more smoother transition for Matt Freeman from Notre Dame compared to LSU. So that's why he chose Notre Dame over LSU. That's the biggest reason for me.
Okay, what about you, Comedy?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, who would you rather go to right now, Notre Dame or LSU? Then, of course, that's just me being stupid. But in all actuality, it's closer to where he's from, and when you're, how do I say this without offending LSU? Because they're still a good program. Notre Dame just seems like the better job to take, and in a few years when he wants to move on, he can probably get any job he wants because Notre Dame will always be at that spotlight. That was definitely a point he thought of. I 100% believe it.
Yeah, and something I don't know if y'all know that.
Again, I'm not trying to offend fans.
Freeman's coached in the Midwest his whole career. So staying, like you said, near where he's from, coaching Notre Dame is going to stay in that area. And I honestly think he picked, like Comedy said, is who's doing better right now. And you're going to go to a LSU team that struggled. I mean, I understand they're young. They're very young, and in a year or two, they're going to be back to being that 10-1 team they're going to be. They still get recruiting talent. But I mean, coaching there, I think it's more stable at the head coach position. I think, yes, Coach O won a national championship, but last year, after he did, if he has another season like that, he's gone. Brian Kelly has had 2 of the last 3 years have been in the playoffs. More stable coaching. What's up, Comedy?
To me, it's like this. I mean, to me, it's like this. Brian Kelly could have been fired in 2016. He absolutely could have. I wouldn't have been surprised if they did. And he basically got unlimited job security at this point. But with LSU, he could be fired at any given moment. If he has another season like this, you said it, he's gone. And Brian Kelly, unless there's, God forbid, a horrible scandal, or we just absolutely tank to the bottom, which I don't see happening either, he's not leaving until he wants to leave.
Yeah. And I said this in my last video. I've never understood why coaches and or recruits want to go to LSU when every year they're problematic. Every year they have a scandal. Every year one of their players in the NFL or at the college ends up getting some type of thing against them on their criminal record. So I don't understand why big recruits want to go there. It just, what's the appeal? I don't know. SEC. That's what I am.
Well, it's obviously when you live
we all know the appeal, but
yeah, the appeal is what happens after LSU, which is just because looking from outside of like the whole criminality thing of like the players and stuff, it's still a terrific like developmental program for the NFL. That's still a recruiting pitch for LSU. They feel very confident that in terms of getting kids into the NFL, they could compete with schools like Alabama.
Defensive backs and wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. You got OBJ, Jarvis Landry, DJ Chark. Those are just like names off the top of your head. And like, Justin Jefferson. I didn't even like, so the fact that Justin Jefferson was the fourth wide receiver that I mentioned, it just shows you that they could still develop and get you into the NFL. So
yeah, that is true.
And Louisiana is a very, very, very good state for high school football in terms of the kids that go there. So
speaking of that, with Notre Dame and recruiting, do you think, I asked this in my last video as well, just to hear y'all's opinion, do you think Notre Dame will bring in another top 5 class like they did in the Monte Teo class?
Within the next 5 years or this year?
Within the next. Top 10. That's what I said. I think they'll continuously bring top 10 classes, and that's all they.
Yeah, I would feel more confident saying top 10 than top 5 because in terms of Notre Dame, when you look at the context of the entire national landscape, or Notre Dame specifically trying to recruit or compete with teams like Alabama and most teams at the SEC. In terms of that context, Notre Dame is recruiting with basically one hand tied behind their back because of all the standards that come along with a university like Notre Dame compared to Alabama or LSU. It's just, Brian Kelly, I think most Notre Dame fans should be, ecstatic that we consistently can bring a top 10, top 15 recruiting class because it cannot be understated how difficult it is to recruit at Notre Dame. You have to try to get top-notch athletes and students to come to the middle of nowhere with religious overtones, high academic standards, and a certain expectation that comes with football tradition and history like Notre Dame. Like, it's like I said, I kind of said this on my other radio show that I do locally around here. It's like when you're like a 4-5-star recruit and Nick Saban comes to your door, his recruiting pitch is, hey, you want to get into the NFL? Do you want to go to play at the NFL? If so, yes, you come here. We'll make sure that we develop you to be a tremendous player. Oh, yeah, and by the way, you can win some national championships on the way to going to the NFL. Whereas when Brian Kelly comes knocking on your door, the same recruit, his pitch is, hey, you could come here for 4 years and we'll be your family for the next 40 years. It's like you can have, there's so many multiple options that you could do, with your degree, you could go still play at the NFL, even though that's not exactly what we're focused on, which is fine. No one is, I don't think you should be upset with that. But in terms of the context of the national landscape, Brian Kelly is really recruiting with one hand tied behind his back compared to recruiters like Saban or Coach O or Kirby Smart. It's really difficult to recruit at Notre Dame.
Like you said, our weaknesses, Midwest, high. You could also argue those are the strengths with recruiting at Notre Dame. Very religious athletes would love to go to Notre Dame, and people who have their whole life have had big grades. There's some athletes like Blake Fisher that are straight A students that would love, that are also thinking about after Notre Dame, they're going to get a guaranteed job because they went to Notre Dame. So that, yes, it's a weakness, but it's also a big strength in our recruiting pitch. So I think that's what they use the pitch is that, hey, you want to graduate Notre Dame? Hey, you religious? Hey, or you want to play for one of the most historic programs in college football history?
To rebuttal your point, obviously, yes, there are some great talents out in Northern California or in the East Coast that have those certain kind of, pathway. But there's a lot of kids in places like Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, down in the deep South where they don't have those. They can't afford that same kind of lifestyle. A lot of them grow up in a poor area or, just it, or like school isn't, obviously their main focus. It's, football is their only way out, which is great, fantastic. I would rather you play football than, doing something, terrible in your life. But, these kids, they want to stay close to home and, they get a great opportunity to go play at a terrific, program like Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Auburn, those kind of places, and they still stay close to home. So.
All right, my last question of the stream for both of y'all, we're all going to answer. Notre Dame winning a national championship. Is it going to happen within the next 5 years, within the next 10 years, 20 years, or never again? And why? We can start with comedy.
All right.
Or not.
I said this just last year. If Notre Dame doesn't win a national championship in the next 10 years, it's a massive disappointment. I mean, yeah, you're like the weaknesses that Notre Dame has, but Alabama is not going to stay this way. It's been this way, but it's not going to stay this way. Clemson is not going to stay this way either. Ohio State, they're always there. They'll always still be good, but you can have your chances. You will have it. If they can't get it done in 10 years, then yeah, there's a problem. Then you might just want to consider like who we are again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they do. Absolutely they do.
I'm gonna
at least in the next 10 years.
This kind of I have to give a lot of credit to Brian Kelly for this because when he was hired here, the expectation was, can we win 10 games? Can we please, for the love of God, just win 10 games? Is that too much? Can we just make it to a New Year's Six Bowl? Is that too much to ask for? And here we are 10, 11 years later. We're like, if Brian Kelly doesn't win a national championship in the next 10 years, then it's a disappointment. So, Comedy, thank you for just, telling all those Brian Kelly haters that, I can finally show the perspective of where this program has gone to in the last 10 years. And I'm going to even push the boundary even more. I think Tyler Buckner is going to be for us what Deshaun Watson was for Clemson. I think he's going to elevate Notre Dame. He's going to be the next Brady Quinn for Notre Dame. I hope to God. That's the kind of potential he has. That's the kind of potential that this kid has. I really believe that. I mean, you could I think if
he
Tyler
can
Buckner stays here and actually gets a shot to play here, I think we can win a national championship while he's here.
I mean, however, I agree. I think we win in the next, I say 10 years. You said 5 and you said 10.
I mean, they can.
Here's the thing. The goal, like you said, used to be, can we win 10 games? Can we make a New Year's Six Bowl? I don't. That's not the goal anymore, obviously. And I don't. Yes, the goal for Notre Dame has always been national championship, but I think us Notre Dame fans realize that we have a different goal and a goal to get to that goal. I think our new goal is win a New Year's Six bowl, win a New Year's Six bowl, win a New Year's Six bowl. Stop with the 0-7 since 1998 and losing to Oregon State, Ohio State, Alabama. And we all by multiple, we lost by like 16 plus in every game of New Year's Six Bowl. So it's, what's so irritating to me is that Iowa State we crushed and they won a New Year's Six Bowl before we did. We crushed them last year. And, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that wishes they weren't in the playoffs so we can get an easy New Year's Six win. I don't want that to be the case. I wanted to be in the playoffs.
No, you absolutely want to be in the playoffs for multiple reasons. Number one is recruiting. You go look at the 24/7 recruiting rankings. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, it's either 7 or of the top 10 recruiting classes, those teams, they have all made the playoffs. Yeah. There's a reason why you want to get into the playoffs for multiple reasons, starting off with recruiting. This is a huge recruit. No matter Notre Dame lost by, they got blown out by Alabama, fine, but this is still a huge recruiting tool where you could say, hey, we made it to the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. If you come to Notre Dame, you could elevate us to that level where we're not just making it to the playoffs, but we win the college football playoff. That's the next step for recruiting.
And I think next year there's going to be a lot of young freshmen.
If I may.
Yeah. Oh. You're good.
Oh.
All right. So with the playoff, with the Notre Dame fans who think that we shouldn't have made the playoffs, I have it quite simply. You're a loser. Like, plain and simple. Like, at least give yourself a shot on the big stage. At least give yourself a shot at the best. What's the worst that can happen? We get blown out? Big deal. We've done that on.
Who wasn't going to get blown out by Alabama?
That's what I said. Who
wasn't going to get blown out by Alabama?
Who was going to do better than what we did?
We had a chance to get back in that game in the middle of the third quarter.
Texas A&M, but don't tell them
that interception. But we put ourselves in a position to, if we scored a touchdown in that drive instead of throwing an interception, we were right back in that game. We had a chance to win. We had a chance to put ourselves in a position. Now, obviously, and unfortunately, we didn't. But we had, and to say, if Notre Dame got really lucky next year, because if we play the schedule that is out right now next year, this will be the easiest schedule since 2018. And we made it to the playoffs that year.
I think this is the easiest independent Notre Dame schedule that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Notre Dame always had a top 15, top 10 schedule in college football. And there's a lot of non-Notre Dame fans that don't realize it because we're not in a conference. But
they're just jealous.
Stats say that, hey, Notre Dame fans like the fact that we change it up every year and we play different teams every year. And I think that this is the easiest one we have. And it's still hard. We still got North Carolina. We still got Cincinnati. We still got Wisconsin. We still got, USC. We still got some of those that they're not amazing, oh my God, teams, but they're still teams that could beat us. But I do end up thinking in this, what is y'all
absolutely
like record predictions? I say we're 10-2, 11-1 next year. What do y'all think?
For me, if Jack Cohn is a starter, I think we go 10-2. If Buckner is a starter, I think we go undefeated. That's it.
Comedy.
Well.
For me, it's not so straightforward. I mean, we lost a lot this year. You said the schedule is easier than we usually have, but I'm personally a big fan of Cohn because, me, I fall in love with every quarterback that Notre Dame has. But I see like 11-1, 10-2, like the rest of you, because like same way. I see us losing maybe to Wisconsin, maybe the greatest grudge match of all time with Cincinnati. And then I could see potential losses at Florida State. Don't laugh at me. They could beat us.
Mackenzie Milton.
Maybe
No.
Here's the thing. People say Wisconsin, but there's no way we're going.
That's why.
Why would we go to our second home for the first time in a long time and lose? It's not going to happen. That's how many fans are going to be there. We're gonna whoop them. I think actually, if Cone starts that game, that we put some numbers on them because he wants revenge. I don't want. It's yes, I like Drew Pine too. I do. I think I would rather have Buckner. However, I would be with Pine.
Beat a Wisconsin team, damn it.
Yeah. I don't want to see Cone because I don't want Buckner's first start in 2022 to be against Ohio State. That's not good, right? I want him to get some playing time. I want him to play. Notre Dame knows they have to. There's going to be a lot of freshmen from. They're still freshmen, right? Because of the eligibility rule NCAA. So freshmen from this year and freshmen for next season are going to play. There's going to be a lot of young people playing for us this year. And that's a good thing because when they're upperclassmen in 2023, we're going to be good.
Yeah, what terrifies me the most in terms of the whole quarterback situation is I could see if Brian Kelly mismanages the quarterback situation in terms of Buckner or Pine even maybe, I could see this happening more with Buckner than Pine. But if Buckner doesn't, start within the first 2 years of him, maybe even next year, if he doesn't even start next year, I could easily see him transferring to a big time program that has the potential to make the playoffs, and him being exactly like what Justin Fields was at Georgia, him transferring to Ohio State, and look where they are now. I could see the same exact thing happening with Tyler Buckner.
Yeah, I don't see 1 year. I think that because he grew up a Notre Dame fan, he fell in love with the university. He's been committed for like almost 3 years now. So I do see him sticking it out and trying to earn his shot. However, I think if 2 years he doesn't start, he's gone, which sucks. I don't want to see him leave.
Here's the thing with here's that though. It's because Fromm decided to come back. Cone is a 1 year. Pine, as much as I was an enthusiast for him for a little while, it doesn't look like he's going to have a chance. It just doesn't. I mean, I hope.
Look at what Clemson did with
it just doesn't.
Kelly
So,
Bryant.
in my opinion, after
Look what Clemson did with Kelly Bryant. Kelly Bryant the year before won them, 12 games. They still made it to the playoff. And the next year, Trevor Lawrence comes in. He's a true freshman, has no clue what he's, the system or anything. And he still benches Kelly Bryant over Trevor Lawrence. And do you think Dabo Swinney regrets that decision at all today? Do you think he regrets that decision at all?
They won a championship that year. No.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, I understand your point, comedy, to where, like, Fromm could stick it out.
I actually do. I was a big believer that Fromm, it was his job. I understand Fields is that 5-star, but I mean, you just got back from the playoffs with Fromm, and he didn't play bad. Why were they so? And honestly, what has, besides Fields' talent, that's what's going to get him in the first round of the NFL. In that Clemson game, before this Clemson game, what has Fields really done to impress the college football world?
I mean, you could say that about this year, but last year he was absolutely phenomenal. Last year he was phenomenal outside, even in that Clemson game, outside of that, game or, that interception to lose the game. But, he had a phenomenal season last year. Now I understand this year, outside of the Clemson game, he hasn't really lived up to that same standard he set for himself, but that doesn't mean he's still look when you talk about quarterbacks like Jake Fromm, Jack Cohn, Drew Pine, you could even throw Ian Book in that conversation too, or in that group, I should say. Those guys, are they great quarterbacks? They're good are they good college quarterbacks? Yes, but first and foremost, what we forget is that they are game managers. When you look at people like Tyler Buckner, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence, those guys are game changers. You can really elevate your play with those kind of quarterbacks. That's the big difference that everyone seems to miss out on. Yes, the safer pick is probably a guy like Fromm, Kelly Bryant, Jack Cohn. Those are the safer picks. Yes, they can win you games. But when you need to win the big game against Alabama or Clemson, you want quarterbacks like Fields, Lawrence, and even Buckner. I think you could put him, if he could, I think he could prove himself to be on that list.
I agree. Well, I think it was a great stream. It's probably where we're going to end it. It was great besides comedy. But I think we enjoyed it.
Look, I'm sorry.
I'll definitely I do this every week because I like to get different views from different Notre Dame fans on different topics, and I like to do it when there's big news. So every time there's big recruits or big news like Marcus Freeman and stuff, I like to do streams. So I'll definitely be doing a stream again soon. Y'all are always welcome back to do more streams, but it was fun. All right, I'm going to end it right here. Go Irish.
Absolutely.
Go Irish. Thank you.